So Ed Stern, our chair for the casting panel, is the lead narrative designer at Splash Damage. Titles he's worked on include the Enemy Territory games, Brink, Arkham Origins MP, Rad Soldiers, Dirty Bomb, and Gears of War Tactics.
Yep. Quake in your graves, Milton and Shakespeare. I'm coming at you with my action bang shooters. Thank you. Casting. Well, thanks. Well, firstly, thanks to Mike for that excellent writing panel. Great. So now we've got a script. Fantastic. We might even have a casting brief. What happens now? To answer that question, we're delighted to have a wonderfully experienced panel who have dealt with casting issues from all sides and all sizes of projects. I'm going to steal Mike's method and make them introduce themselves. We have Samantha Béart, Olly Johnson, Kirsty Gillmore, and John Paul Sutherland. Samantha Béart, who the hell are you?
Hello. I'm an actor primarily. I trained professionally in theatre, but I've sort of got into audio, sci-fi and fantasy, which is quite the niche. And I love video games, and I thought that would transfer quite well. That experience would transfer quite well. So I'll just rattle off some games I've done. Games include Demon's Souls Remake, Total War Troy, Age of Wonders 3, and Nelly Coutelot, The Foul Fleet, which is a point-and-click adventure game. And audio includes The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, The Sandman for Audible, which was released yesterday, Alien River of Pain, that's also for Audible, North Star Rising with Mike Bithell, and Torchwood and Doctor Who for Big Finish Productions.
Olly Johnson, who are you?
Sorry, I just had a complete moment there when you said Demon's Souls Remaster, because it's got some of my favourite characters of all time in it, so very good. So I'm Olly. I'm the dialogue producer at Codemasters. I actually started off as a junior sound designer, and then I just felt that I worked best with dialogue, and I started to really enjoy it, really enjoy the challenges that we faced. I've worked on shooty bang stuff like Operation Flashpoint, football games, cricket games, and now primarily racing games, where we're trying to add a layer of realism on top of it to match the on-track action, and that can pose plenty of interesting casting opportunities for us as well.
I see. Kirsty Gillmore, who the hell are you?
Hello, everyone. I'm a voice director and a sound designer, and I've been directing in the game sphere for around 5 years. I also direct across, so I direct games, I also direct across audio drama and animation as well. I'm currently the voice director for Destruction All Stars for Lucid Games, which is coming out at some point. And I'm directing on other games at the moment, big fantasy games. I've also done a lot of audio drama direction for various companies, and a lot of casting in amongst all of that, along animation and audio drama and games as well, across a lot of different genres. And I've also worked a lot with actors at drama schools as well. I've taught at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland and the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama. Just dealing with, I actually started as a sound designer. That was my original background, and I've moved into voice directing and directing over a number of years because I really, really enjoy it. And I love sound design, but I really love the different kind of aspects that you get from working with actors, and how the two worlds kind of interact as well. And I should also say that I'm also a voice actor. So I also I've done voice acting for audio drama and for BBC audio drama and radio drama and games as well. So I've got a kind of a rounded view of the process and working with people.
Awesome. Last, very not least, John Paul Sutherland, what's going on?
Hello. Thank you for having me along. So I'll keep it brief. I have worked in TV and film for about 15 years. Spent a lot of time in recording studios, working with actors. Spent quite a lot of time as a sound designer and dubbing mixer as well. But the thing I always really enjoyed the most was working in the studio with actors. So last June, I took the plunge of switching from the TV and film industry to working with games, which has been fascinating, terrifying, steepest learning curve I've ever come across in my life. But I'm really enjoying myself. And I work at, I now work as a senior dialogue engineer at Creative Assembly. They're letting me loose on projects left, right, and centre. Quite a lot of material coming out. Yeah, it's been a bit of a baptism of fire, but it's definitely one that I've been enjoying a lot. And since being there, worked across 2 projects, both actually unreleased at this point in time, so I can't really say anything about them, but as you know, everybody would probably understand. But it's revolves around a lot of casting, loads of directing, lots of implementation, which we'll probably move on to a bit later. But yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at now. But yeah, happy to be here. Thank you.
Smashing. Awesome. Thank you very much indeed. Right.
Just before we get cracking, I've just remembered a couple of people were raising their hands. There's a functionality to raise your hand, apparently. We can't really do much about that. So if you do have a question, can you please put it in the Q&A and we'll try and get to you. Thank you.
So maybe it's just the sheer joy of clicking. Who's to say? Right. So as being a casting director, what, Kirsty, wearing that hat, what do you need to do your job? What, like, is it but feel free to to include in your answer the phrases casting brief and NDA.
Well, let's start with those. I think that's good. So I think, yeah, the first thing that I need from the devs, whether that's the writers or the producers or whoever's responsible for probably lots of people coming together to create a casting brief, is the casting brief. I need something clear with an idea as a very, very, very minimum, the age range they're looking for, the accent, voice type they're looking for, or if they're not looking for anything specific, the gender that they're looking for, if they are, the ethnicity that they're looking for, if they are looking for something specific, but also, and then a bio about the character. And I just caught the tail end of the writers panel earlier, and I can't remember who talked about being able to, I think it was Andy, talking about being able to sum up your character in a few words, like a sentence. And if you can't do that, then you need to think about that more clearly, because you can give a ton of information about it, you know, to the actor. But really what we need to do is say in, you know, a real sum up of what is this character? What, you know, who are they? What is their relationship in the world? What are they after? What do they want? You know, and then once I've got all of that, and artwork is always really useful as well. If they have it, sometimes reference artwork, sometimes reference artwork can be good. And then demo lines, like a good range of lines throughout the game that hit on different points of the game. So it's not just all the shouty stuff. It's not just all aggressive stuff. It's, you know, if the character has an arc, then we want demo lines that represent that. And sometimes those haven't been written. So a lot of times that hasn't been written. So you want the writers to give you something so you can say, okay, to the actor, so I can hear you at as many emotional beats as we possibly can, basically, to get in it. Doesn't have to be a long thing. Believe me, we don't want to go through 1,000 3-minute auditions. You know, nobody has time to do that. But just to get those lines, I would say as a starting point. Yeah, that's that casting brief. NDAs somebody can probably cover, but that's really important as well, so the actors are really aware up front. And then I'd say the next thing that I would want after that is really if the devs because all of my work is as a freelancer, so I'm going to different devs and going different studios and going, you know, what do you want? I would say that the next thing is, do they have any particular actors in mind? Do they have anybody that they want to approach? Or do they have any agencies that they've worked with before that they really want to approach? Do they have any particular casting methods in mind that they really like using? That would be, yeah, so those would be kind of my fundamental things to kind of start with. And I guess the last thing is budget. How much are you willing to pay? Because that can have a big impact on casting. If you have your budget can be like, you know, just to throw a really famous name out there, like I really see Troy Baker playing this role, great. But that comes with a price tag. Is that the level that you're prepared to pay for? Or are you looking for, you know, what is your budget range? What are we looking at here? And we're also, I think, because the games that I work on are very international, so something I'm always having to be aware of is, do you have restrictions on location as well? Can you deal with, if you cast in the US, you're probably going to run into SAG rules, union rules. Can you deal with that? Can you deal with different countries? Is that something that you feel prepared to do with? And especially in the global situation at the moment, every country has different COVID-19 regulations. How are we going to record the actors? That kind of needs to be set out at the start as well. Are we doing this home record? Are we employing studios? Is it just in the UK? Are we opening it out internationally? And all of that will affect your casting brief as well.
So it's not just a creative brief; it's also a technical, contractual, financial brief as well. Right.
At the moment, I think it depends on the dev. Like if you've got creative assembly, you've got your own studios, haven't you? Yeah, so that might be, I mean, I don't know obviously what your situation is at the moment with COVID, but it might, that might be for studios, for devs that have their own studios or are working with a company with their own studios, then that's a consideration. Are we going to use their studios, or do we have to use home studios, or are we going to use a mixture, or is it just home studios? And so it does become a technical brief, because then your audition, when you get auditions in, if you decide to go down the home studio route, it's not just a creative decision, it's an audio decision as well. So that's another layer. You want your dialogue editors, your sound designers, whoever's dealing with it, to sign off on the quality of the audio as well. And that's going to bring another layer to it. So it's like, right, well, everybody who can only record an iPhone, we can't take that.
Sure. Olly, I want to bring you in at this point, because obviously there's lots of different kinds of game, and some of them are sort of I was going to say pseudo cinematic. They're certainly trying to be cinematic, and it's very much a dialogue situation.
Yeah.
You've been working on games where it's sort of different. Could you talk a bit about the titles you've been working on and your experience trying to cast voices for those very specific roles?
Yeah, well, so we're basically a racing studio, so we do racing games, whether they're arcade games or they're like Formula One or they're rally. They're very realistic. So there's a couple of different ways that we approach our casting. So for like Formula One 2019, we wanted to have a little story mode in it, and in that way, we actually use a company that helps us cast. So we use Pit Stop. You would have probably heard of those, and whether you use those or not, we really find that sort of having an outside impartial view on what we do really helps us. And we will often bring them into the studio and give them the pitch that we would give to executives or to other people to sell the game, so that they can use their expertise along with my expertise to help go in the same direction and get us the best result possible. And maybe advise us on how to write a casting bio. So always, I think, looking, no matter what my experience level may be, it's always worth seeing if somebody else has got a little bit more experience in that area. For example, we always want to try and get as close to reality with our games as possible. One of the examples that I've got is, for example, we wanted to have some announcers for Grid, our last game, and we wanted to have people that were quite into motorsport, so that if they wanted to ad-lib, that they could do, because when you've got commentary, we actually almost just want to play people races and for them to be able to ad-lib over the top of it. So that was a really important thing for us to be able to do, to allow the actors to do that. So in the brief, it was not a stipulation, but if you're into motorsport, let us know. We'll phone up and have a conversation about it and see if that's something that you're interested in doing. And we found people that were interested in motorsport and brought a whole new level to it.
So for something like that, it's not just a question of, matching the character. There's a kind of an authenticity you can't really compromise on there.
Exactly. And another example I've got, we did a game called Onrush. And one of the things that we really wanted to do was to have these kind of Unreal Tournament style announcer or like Mortal Kombat fatality voices. It's a very small bit of the game, but something I'm really proud of. Eventually we decided that we wanted to have lots of these different styles of voices in the game that represented different types of video games, all the way from something like a wrestling game or a fighting game to a 2D shoot 'em up, a football commentator, all these different things. So we really put a bit of a challenge there. And the one that we really struggled with was we had this great casting call and everything got cast perfectly. But the one that we couldn't quite find was one for a kind of Def Jam Fight for New York style kind of hype man rap voice. It was really difficult, and sending that out to voice actors just wasn't working. You were getting
impressions back.
We were getting impressions. Yeah, we were getting impressions of something. And so actually we went back to Pit Stop and we said, look, we're not getting what we want. So we changed the brief. And we also just reached out to record studios and like kind of local sort of hip hop artists and groups and got the real person in. And actually they came in and again, they ad-libbed. They didn't use any of the words that I wrote because I'm some guy from Coventry and he's from New York and he's that person. So yeah, I can't stress how much that we try and get as close to the actual person. Obviously, look, in a fantasy game, you're not going to be able to find a lizard man just walking around the streets. But for us, if there's an element of reality to it, then see if you can find somebody that has that passion already, and it makes your job so much easier because they can just walk into that role a lot better.
Okay, thank you very much. John Paul, could we talk a bit about the kind of contractual and financial limitation on this? Because this is a constraint that I know, I mean, obviously actors and agents are very involved in, and a lot of developers just don't get. The number of times where I've been in studio and somebody from my work has said, oh, while they're there, could they record some lines for this other project? And I was like, no, we've only bought them out for one project. You can get 3 different voices for them for that one project, but you can't do anything for another game. Could you just go into a bit about just what the kind of serving size is for hiring a voice actor for casting?
I mean, obviously, how long is a piece of string, I suppose, in terms of what the game is and what the project is. In terms of budget, it can sometimes be quite difficult because there's not an endless supply of cash to be able to pay every single person that we'd like to come in and record every single part individually. There is a reality of the fact that we are making sometimes games where we have hundreds of different characters and we have a finite amount of time and people that we can actually record for them. And that's a bit of a reality of the gig, I suppose. I mean, as I said, ideally we'd like to, we could just have our cast of thousands and a lot of times, I mean, in terms of getting people to kind of read for other projects that they may not necessarily have been brought in for, that I couldn't say I've ever seen that personally, and I wouldn't recommend anybody does it because I think there's I think you're in really murky water if you start doing that. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I mean, but I'm just saying I wouldn't go down that road. I think in terms of to touch on a couple of things that we were talking about a little while ago, just about the casting brief. Kirsty made a really good explanation of that. I think it's really important just to touch on that, to know that it's a two-way conversation, and sometimes you can go back to them if there's not enough detail in that brief, and the brief is kind of really critical. Send it back, and knowing that you can do that, and filling it up with material that doesn't actually inform you as an actor or a director is almost useless. Send it back, give me something that gives me something to go on, because sometimes they can be full of detail that just really doesn't matter at all.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter when you're coming to when you're coming to record.
Left-handed and have green eyes. Yes.
Doesn't help. But yeah, it's a reality that we have to get in terms of actors recording for multiple parts. It's just sometimes a bit of a reality that you kind of have to go, we're making a video game, and we've got so many characters that we want to fill. We do have, and the reason why we have you here is because your voice works so beautifully for these 5 or 6 different characters that we want to use across our game. They're never going to be talking to each other, so it works. But it's a bit of a reality, I suppose. And the pie is getting sliced so many different ways these days because the scope of games is expanding so fast that at the end of the day, the pie is being sliced so many times. It is difficult. It's a really difficult balancing act. And I think a lot of game developers, where there is someone particular who might particularly, just really tick every single box, you'll make that work. Like you'll just try and make that work as best as you can. And there's always a bit of back and forth there. But if I kind of feel if someone is absolutely spot on for a part and absolutely perfect, then you've got to go for it. You can't never settle for second best. You've always got to go for the very best fit you can for any part. And that touches on what you're saying, Ollie, about just, sometimes you've really got to cast the net so much wider than you ever thought possible. Because I think the player can see through it when you've not quite made the right choice. When you've sort of, found something that's a bit of a compromise. I think you can always see through it. You definitely can, because you're making it, but I'm pretty sure that also transfers through to the player as well. I'm pretty sure they can see through it a lot of the time.
Sure. Okay, Samantha, it's time to explain the dreaded NDA.
So am I doing it?
So the non-disclosure agreement. So from a developer side, people are incredibly paranoid about security and publicity. So quite often, as a developer, we've been hired by a publisher, and maybe we've licensed the brand or IP from somebody else. For instance, oh Lord, just worked on a Gears of War game. We don't own Gears of War. We're making a game for the people who do. And they've only got one chance to announce this game, and there's a huge marketing budget and a lot of people obsessed with firing that one bullet they've got. And for that to leak through someone talking in a green room going, yeah, I got this thing coming up, like that's what they're paranoid about. But as a performer, what kind of hoops are you having to jump through to obey the strictures of the dreaded NDA?
I mean, you get a threat to be sued if you talk about it, so that sticks. But I think a lot of actors who do this regularly, the frustration is if we're in a Marvel movie, we know what movie we're in, all right? And if we tell people about it, we can still be sued. And people don't habitually do that. Big music release, if a big artist is waiting for a certain date to drop it, everyone who worked on that, all the collaborators, the engineers, every musician, they'll have signed an NDA, and they don't leak. And if they do, they'll get sued. So from sort of an outsider perspective, from a freelancer perspective, I go in, I do a game, I don't know what the name of the game is. We've kind of had to work out what a rate is, because there's no minimum rates that have been agreed in this country, unlike America. And then the game comes out and you haven't been told you're in it. So I find it has been quite disrespectful. This tends to be the AAAs, the indies you'll have more contact with.
Sorry,
but unless you can guess what game you're in, which I've had to do, you might not even know what games you're in.
A, that's insane. B, can we just explain AAA? So when I joined the industry far too long ago, so single A meant you had kind of about like £1 or £2 million or dollar budget, maybe marketing budget. Double A was kind of like 5 or 6 million, and AAA was kind of 10 million. We're still saying AAA, but that includes things like Halo or Modern Warfare, where it's possibly a $300 million development budget and another 300 million marketing budget on top of that. So
it's like movies, isn't it? Like blockbuster versus indie, and there's nothing in between.
So big studio, exactly. Yeah, the middle stuff's going to fall out. It's either indie, kind of low resolution indie, or it's pseudo cinematic blockbustery kind of big blockbuster game. So, Kirsty, I just want to, it should, in this glorious day and age, it should be easy to use technology to bring supply and demand together. Where do you find actors? How do casting directors find actors and hear what they can do?
$1 million question, isn't it? Like Ollie mentioned outsourcing studios like Pitstop. And Pitstop is one of several outsourcing studios, audio outsourcing studios in the UK and in the US as well. And you'll find, so there's a couple of ways of doing it. You can work, if you are working with if you want to go to an outsourcing studio, you will probably find that outsourcing studio has links with agents and agencies and rosters of voice actors they work with. they will have a number of, they will have people that they go out and look for. They also have casting directors. I find a lot of casting directors who do a lot of casting have a personal database. I have a personal database of actors, so that when I'm casting, I can go reach out to my personal database and go, can you look at this for me? That might include reaching out to agents as well. It depends on what sort of relationships I have and the budgets and what sort of game it is as well. If the other end of the scale, kind of, if you're an indie dev looking to cast your first game, really there are, I would say, if you can afford a casting director, then what the value that you get out of that is you do get someone with all those contacts, and they already have a database of actors that they can go, I've used them before, or I know that they're good. They can give you those kind of contacts. Now, I appreciate that that's not something that a lot of indie devs can afford. So if you do go down the casting route yourself, then there are places that you can go. There are pay-to-play sites, they call them, that voices pay, that you can put auditions on. I'm not going to name names because there are a lot of them out there, and I'm not a fan, so I wouldn't personally go to a pay-to-play site to go and find actors, because I think the quality that you get is incredibly variable, and what you're getting from it is not necessarily actors as well. You might get a lot of people who just do commercial voiceover, and that's a different thing. So what you find, I think, if you do go down sort of looking for actors from a pay-to-play site, is that you are setting yourself up to wade through a lot of stuff. Like a lot of poor stuff. It's if you don't, but I appreciate the going down, like a casting director might be out of your price range, and using different agencies as well, just going directly to agents, that has a cost implication as well. I would say that one of the really effective ways of, if you're looking to cast an indie game, is that you can put call outs on Twitter, but you can also go to other voice actors you've worked with before and ask them to recommend people to you. And what you get that way is you get a kind of quality check, and you get people who, you get a smaller group of people. Because what I find, like a lot of indie devs have talked to me, like I've put out this casting call and I've got like 2,000 applicants, and I just have no idea where to start with that. Right. Like, what do I do with that amount of things? So I think it's a way, what you're looking for, what anybody is looking for, is to make the casting process easier. And so, yeah, using outsourcing studios is one way, going to specific agencies is one way. I just want to really quickly touch on the fact that what people fall into problems with this is that when you are trying to expand the diversity of your voice actors, which all games should be trying to do, is that you do end up going, if you're going down the same routes and you're using the same pool of actors, then you are limiting the amount of options you have. So I would say anybody who's casting, whatever the route they choose, make sure that you have those, make sure that you are encouraging diversity in your casting options. And whether that means telling the outsourcing studio that actually, that, you know, making it really clear to them about what you're looking for and you want them to cast a diverse group of actors, making sure that the casting directors you talk to, you know, really making sure that they have a wide range of actors that they are sending it out to, because voice acting can be very white, it can be very middle class. It can also be a lot of the time, I'm not sure, I haven't seen like the gender balance, but a lot of games have a lot of male roles. I got an email from a voice casting director that I know really well, and they've just been casting, basically their last 5 games have all been all male roles. That's it. So that happens. The first one, they're like, yay, finally it's a female roles I can send out. I mean, you know, so that's another conversation about it. But just you know, I would say just whoever you go to, make sure that don't just rely, I would say really push it, don't just rely on them that they will do that. Make sure that diversity is part of your conversation, whoever you go to. Hopefully that kind of gives you some options, Ed. That kind of covered a lot of ground really quickly. Sure. But if that's kind of, there is no one, I would say there's no one answer that's going to work for absolutely everybody. So, and it does depend on your budget and does depend. So if you are an indie company, you know, give something a go. But I would say if you have never cast anything before, go out and get some advice, because it will make your life so much easier than when you just send out a Twitter call and you get 2,000 applicants and you have no idea where to start. Nothing's organized. You're getting people sending like iPhone auditions. Just actually have a conversation with a professional about it before you go, and just make your life easier. Makes your life easier. Yeah, so there are a lot of way to find, but also I think it also comes down to, just very quickly, like, who do you want? Like Ollie was saying, you know, who are you looking for? You might, like, going to acting agencies might not be the best thing for your game. Figure out what it is you want to cast, like what you're looking for these people, and then you'll have a much better idea of who you need to go to look for that. Maybe it is music studios, you know, maybe it's puppeteers, maybe it's, you know, maybe it's somebody complete, maybe it's spoken word artists. You know, maybe you are actually literally looking for wrestling announcers. That's the tone you want, you know, and that's a whole different level. So I think just knowing that will also, it's not just where you find actors, but it's where you find the people that are right for your game as well, the right to voice your game.
Right. Well, look, I hear all this, but, you know, and I hear all this about authenticity and diversity, but I've done an accent course and I'm pretty sure, you know, I pay good money for that course, and I'm pretty sure I could act any character at all. And I watch lots of movies, so why don't I just do it?
Go on then. So I'll jump in about diversity and privilege and all sorts of things of that nature, if I can do that as quickly as possible. I would add that if you are looking for something very specific, like a dialect or another language or a specific ethnicity, go to Spotlight. It's a thing called Spotlight. All the actors are on Spotlight. Please don't come to me with like a random Indian accent and just spring that on me and think I'm going to do it, because I'm not. And most voice actors are pretty good and won't.
But you're
do it.
BAME. You're diverse.
I can do them all, right?
Right?
And I get that. So I get tagged in a Twitter post that doesn't have payment. I'll click into someone's GDocs. It'll have. I say this because I love you all. It's not anger, it's passion. I'll go in, it will say we're paying 6 cents per word, and then not tell me what the word count is. I have no idea. And then I look at the breakdown, and that person is East Asian or they're Nigerian, and they've just decided that as long as this person isn't 100% white, they can play anything. And that, like, we're not going to do it either. So again, you can either ask voice actors that exist. We're happy to do that. There's something called Spotlight, and I think I'd like to, in this future, I'll do a session with them, because I think we need to really hook up with them. I mean, it's literally, when you say we can't find the actors, that is where they are. That's where they live.
Sam, sorry, just to interrupt. To look for actors on Spotlight requires like a casting profile, which costs money. So you do need to find someone. It's absolutely there, but you do need to find someone who's got access to it in order to do that. And I don't think a lot of people in games realize that. So it's realizing the access there, but also like you need to find someone who can have access to it, I think, as well.
Yeah, and I think you can subscribe on short periods. You don't have to do a whole year. That can be done, you can do it for like on a monthly.
Even a monthly
They'll
basis,
also give you lots of advice as well, and then that will hook you up with agencies that might specialize in these areas that you're looking for as well. It'll open things up. And the other thing is, I sort of put myself in the shoes of a sort of indie casting director, and I went through and I tried to join, and then it said you needed so many credits as a casting director. I thought, right, okay, so I think we need to have a word with them at some point and talk about the nature of this industry and the hat wearing that is going on, and how we can make it easier. Because that is the one question that everyone is screaming at me, is how do I get more work? How do I get in contact with you, especially in this era? I mean, because things are being cast right now, right? But I click on Spotlight and it'll be one thing every 2-3 weeks. It'll be a mocap thing. That'll be it. So if you're ready to go, if you have the privilege of being able to afford a home studio, because that's another thing, if you have the privilege to be able to afford to go to expensive accent classes, and you think you're ready to go, and then on the other hand you fall off the end, and then there's no job to go to. So we really need to hook up and work out how we can all be in contact a bit better, because I don't think pay to play is necessarily the best way forward in the future. It's not sustainable, that's a fact. It's a race to the bottom.
So
in terms of, sorry, I was going to say, just on the Spotlight thing, I know in terms of that, we are trawling Spotlight like all the time, and like literally all day, every day. There's probably someone on my team looking at Spotlight, looking for someone. The thing that I think really speaks to me and other people that I work with is that if you cover, you can filter things out. Like you can filter what you're looking for. The amount of people that go, I can do this 35 accents, and I can do this, I cover every voice tone. And you go onto their Spotlight page, and then you look at it and you're like, well, there's no evidence of any of this here. You could be a master of all those accents. you could legitimately cover every regional accent in the UK, but I can't see it. So I'll just move on to the next person that might have a bit of evidence of that. So I mean, that spotlight is fantastic, and I think it is a really, really useful tool. I don't know how, I don't actually know if we actually put that much in terms of we are looking for people on Spotlight, but I know that there are people that are looking to cast are looking at Spotlight all the time. So it's not like it's not being looked at.
That's really good news as well. And I just want to, that's also good for the actors watching. Like, if you're going to say that you've got these skills, can you please display them? Like, you're a voice actor, also, put your reel up.
Yeah, but be specific. Like, don't put something on there that you go, I did a New York accent in a pantomime once, and then go, it's and then not give me an example of it, because then I'm like, well, I'm just going to find someone else that can show me what they can do. And I think in terms of, are we all right to talk about just quickly about showreel stuff?
I was going to go on to that next, yeah.
Because I think when you do find people that have something that you're looking for, say an accent or say a voice tone or whatever, then the next step is whittling down those potentially Spotlight 250 people maybe to find the people who can act, and then have a show reel which shows off something that you're looking for. Like the bells and whistles that go into people's show reels sometimes, it just gets it's so difficult to hear what they're actually like as an actor when you've got, like, it always opens up with like, here is robot voice number 1, and it's tons of processing, tons of reverb, explosions going off everywhere. That's your first 30 seconds, that's your first impression, and I'm like, don't know if you can act or not. That's and also I'm here to hear the Liverpudlian accent for this thing I'm doing or whatever, and I'm like, you've opened up with robot voice, whatever. Like, be specific. And also, if you don't open with robot voice, that's number 1. Just don't open with welcome to mission control, because no one, if we wanted that, we get that from someone in the office, or probably able to dish that out for us at some point. Open up with a really good bit of acting. Also, put stuff on there that's useful for a game developer. So, like, A, great acting. B, like, we want to hear, like Kirsty was talking about, the casting script covering all the bases in terms of what we want to hear from you in a casting session. Do that in your show reel as well. Like, show us that you can produce some incredible vocalization, because the chances are someone's going to shoot at you in this game at some point. So we're going to need to hear you scream. We're going to need to hear you fall off a ledge. We're going to need to hear you running with, someone on your back or whatever. I don't know, like, I'm just silly examples, but.
Wow, I've never actually heard exerts on anyone's show reel.
No.
I have.
Oh, I'll do some. I think I've got some lined up. I send them out specially.
There are. I think
it's a separate business.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point, John. Just having like, starting people starting with a natural voice. Like, if it's got on your Spotlight that your native accent is Irish, like Dublin Irish, great. I want to hear your show reel with that opening. I want to hear that, because I'm looking at you for that. I don't want to, like, I think I have a lot of actors saying, like, I listened to someone's reel the other day, it started with Russian. I'm like, you're not Russian. Why have you got a Russian voice on the start of it? This is bonkers. And I had to, and I knew them personally. So I dropped the line going, look, do you have anything with just your natural voice on it? Because you're a Scottish guy. I'm looking for Scottish. I can't use this. I'm not going to listen through. If I'm not going to listen through, the dev's not going to listen through. So just send me something, an audiobook read, something acting that's in your native voice. They're like, oh, I don't know if I've got anything. And I'm like, well, have you got your show reel? Can you give me your visual show reel? Has that got your natural voice on it? Fine. Yes, great. And actually, I know a lot of casting directors for games who don't go to voice reels at all because of this problem, because of the fact that they're really noisy, they're really over-processed, and they don't start with people's natural voices. Also, military voices, starting with military voices really annoys me as well, in American accents or poor American accents. Get down! It's like, brilliant.
The other thing about watching a video show reel of someone, they are really, really useful, because they also often show a physical aspect to acting, which is actually really crucial to the work that we do in the recording studio. Like, I personally love to see people physically embody the character, and that's that in the casting process as well. Like, when you get them in, sometimes you want to see them physically embody this person that you're doing, and, you know, take a stance or whatever, because it totally helps. Like, you can really hear it on a recording when someone is physically acting as well as vocally acting. And the video showreels actually are really good for that. You can see that when they're acting on camera, doing a bit of that. So I would recommend having that kind of stuff available. The more tools we have available, the more tools we have about your skills, the better. It allows us to make a really informed decision.
I think that's it. It's the informed decision. And I think also something that gets a little bit overlooked sometimes in games is that a lot of the games that I do have a bit of comedy in it. They're not comic games, but there are stuff that we need people to show that they can handle a funny line. And I find that nobody's gaming reel is going to show me that. Well, very few, I think, because it's a difficult thing to do, because you don't want to cross over into like animation, silly, that kind of thing. But what I like with a lot of people's visual show reels is that if they've got like a light-hearted comedy on there, I can see how they approach funny lines, and that's quite useful. I do a lot of the games I do, they are serious dramatic games, but there's lines in there I want to be able to know that an actor can deliver deliver a punchline, can deliver a joke. And seeing that, and it's a real shame when you've got an actor and you think they're great, and you're working with them, you're like, oh, you've got no sense of humor. This is tricky. This is going to make this a bit, aside from the fact the session's a bit orcs, I tell terrible jokes in my session, and I like people to laugh at least sympathetically, so that's fine. But I think, but just, you know, getting, again, coming back to that all-rounded thing, you want to get an all-round, especially if it's a significant character, you want to get that full picture of what an actor can do. What can you bring to this for us? And it all ties back again to the authenticity. We want to cast the character that is the actor that works best. So we want to get a full thing, you know, a full picture.
And also, I guess, sorry, I'll just jump in one time, but tying all that stuff together about the casting bio, and also making sure that the artist feels utterly safe in the studio to do that for you. Because actually what we're asking, the things that we were just talking about a second ago, is some really difficult things to ask someone to produce for you, actually. Like, it's really hard. And I guess it's in terms of casting, like, especially when you're, you know, you've actually got the artist in the studio and you're getting to that point where you're doing reads with them in a room. It's creating that safe space and where they trust you enough to have dialogue and all that. That could be a whole different. That's probably actually more to do with our next little thing. But
just to add on to that, actually, I think at the casting phase is a good point, because we don't always get the scripts in advance. In fact, most of the time we don't get the scripts in advance. If there's anything controversial, like sex scenes or maybe racial slurs that you want our characters to say, or witchcraft, because some people aren't down with that, can you just let us know before we sign the contract that that's coming up? Because again, you're saving yourself a lot of hassle in the future in the studio, and it's a considerate thing to do.
Awesome. I'm afraid we are right out of time. And so now the good news is we found the perfect actor. They have done exactly what they needed to do. They provided a brilliant show reel that with an authentic voice. It wasn't too grunty. It wasn't robo voice. It wasn't an announcer voice, unless that's actually what's required. And they got, by various means, a casting director found them, cast them, and now you're in the studio about to be directed for the voiceover directing session. That's Andy Walsh's session coming up next. Thank you so much to the panel, Kirsty, John Paul, Olly and Samantha. Thank you very much for that. We could go on. There's a lot more to talk about. Alas, we have to end it there. We shall now throw over to Mr. Andy Walsh for the directing panel. Thank you very much indeed, guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks, everyone.